the expert. Love hearing from her. So our goal today is just that you walk away with one nugget to help your business go to the next level. I'll start off. I'm Michaella. I haven't even started with that. I'm from Contractor Appointments. I am the director of sales here. I'm taking over webinars for Sean. I'm trying to do them weekly to every other week or so, and just trying to get some good information out here for you guys. As I've already talked about, I'm currently living in Idaho, selling my house in Idaho, moving back to Montana, where I'm from. I am a mom. I'm a wife. I am the director of sales. Just a lot of things all wrapped into one, and just really excited for this. And Megan, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself for those who may not know, and looking forward to hearing it.
All right. I've got some fans in the Q&A. Thanks, guys. But yeah, for those of you that don't know me, I am a consultant for Hoty Training and Consulting, and I pretty much handle everything call center wise that comes in terms of requests for help, for recruiting, scripting, processes, confirmation. I mean, everything from how we handle brand new leads coming in the door through, converting 20-year-old sweepstakes leads and everything in between. So we focus a lot on coaching companies on objection handling and overcoming the stall and things that just sort of, affect us when we're using lead aggregators, when we're not using lead aggregators, all of the above. So we do a lot of coaching for call centers in our industry. And so some of our clients are on this call and some of our future clients are on this call. So either way, if we can help you, let us know.
I love to hear it. And yeah, like I said, I mean, you have a lot of fans in the comments, as we can see, and that's basically what I've heard as well on my end, is just everybody loves you, and you're just such a wealth of knowledge, and really looking forward to this. So we can go ahead and kick it off. I'll start strong with my first question for you. It's all about recruiting. So obviously you want to build a good team. What goes into that recruiting process? How should you be recruiting? How to build that strong team to start?
Sure, absolutely. So, it's like anything else in our businesses when it comes to recruiting, and that is we have to have a process, right? And what we find is when most companies struggle with recruiting, and call center is one of those areas that, everyone seems to have some struggle, whether it's, getting qualified candidates in the door, getting them to show up for interviews, or even just getting them to take the call center position and, come in and start working for us. We have to have a process. We have to have a process of what we do to, talk to qualified individuals. We have to have a process for how we screen out people we may not be looking for that aren't a good culture fit for us. And that process also has to include, when we bring them on, what's their first day like? What does training look like? What kind of things do we have set up for when we bring them in? And, one of the things I would tell people that I think just completely gets missed in our industry is that we need to always be recruiting. It's like you hear the old adage, always be closing. Always be recruiting is one of those things that always puts you in a position of power versus a position of lack. If we only hire when we need people, we have this tendency to hire people we normally wouldn't hire. We have the tendency to hang on to people too long that aren't performing, all because we think in our mind that someone's better than no one. And I got to tell you, sometimes that's not the case. Right. Sometimes they're doing damage to us and we don't realize it because we're not keeping that funnel full of qualified applicants coming in. And one thing I like to say is, there's never a bad day to find a superstar. So we always want to be looking. We always want to have our eyes open and be looking for the next, talented individual. They're found all kinds of places, right? Like, everybody wants to do this post and pray. I'm going to post ads on Indeed or on one of the hiring sites, and I'm going to pray, that people call in and want this job opportunity. And, some people will come to us that way. But if that's the only thing we're doing, we end up in a position where if we don't have people, we have no other funnel that's sort of feeding people into our business. So my advice is be always looking. Don't limit yourself to just when you need people, right? If you're going through the drive-through and you find that this person in the drive-through is particularly jovial, right? This person has a great personality. This person, I could talk to this person all day. Well, they probably want to get out of food service. I'm just going to guess that that's not their career forever, right? Most likely. What if we offered them a job where they could come in and make exactly what they're making hourly now, plus bonuses? always be looking, right? I tried to get this kid in the Taco Bell drive-thru that lives right by my house, right? I go by this Taco Bell drive-thru, get my kids these little donuts they like. I go through there and I go through the drive-thru, Michaela, and I find one day he says, I'm having a Baja Blast here at Taco Bell. Like he's got all these little quippets he made up.
I love it.
I got to get that kid on the phone.
Yeah.
Get on the phone, man. This kid, so you always be looking, right? Don't just assume that when you need someone, that's when we need to look. We need to be looking ahead of time so we never have to tolerate some of those bad behaviors or say, oh, sorry, sales team, we don't have enough appointments because such and such took vacation and we didn't have a backup plan, right? If we're always recruiting, we can plan for some of those things. We're in a better position than if we just kind of are always looking when we need someone.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's great. I remember, so when I first broke into sales many, many years ago, I started off in car sales. And I remember my manager being like, every time I call Verizon, I want to hire their guys. Like I'm constantly offering these people positions to come work for me because I just tell that like they're so excited, they're so happy, they're so good on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so true, just keeping your ears and your eyes open no matter where you are, whether it's a cashier at Walmart or someone at Taco Bell or someone that you had to talk to their service department and they were amazing.
Bartenders and wait staff, servers, those, and they're used to working weird hours and being on partial commission if they make tips, right?
Yeah.
So you're already sort of conditioned to work on the base pay plus bonus structure, which is what most of us offer. So
yeah, I agree. And Maddie actually asked a really great question here. She said her biggest struggle is that the new hire does great at first, but then they start not performing. How do you recommend that be handled? Is that you give them warning? Do you work with them more?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things, and I like to talk about the sink and the well, right? So here's the thing. We see the symptoms of it is a sink problem. There's no water coming out of the faucet, right? But this one actually goes back further. It's more of a well problem, meaning we need to get to the root of the cause, right? And so if we have someone coming in and we train them and they do well, and we're like, oh, this my saving grace. I finally hired one that's killing it, right? It's going great. They're doing it. And then all of a sudden they go, right? We call it in sales the sophomore slump, okay? And here's the problem. I would say 99% of the time I've uncovered, Maddie. The problem is that they've went off script and decided that they know enough now that they're going to start doing it their own way. Because they don't just change overnight. In the beginning, all they know is the script. So all they do is the script.
Yeah.
All they know is the training we've taught them, and they follow that because they don't know any different. Then they get in, couple weeks, couple months, they hear one of the other callers using something that they think sounds good, and they start going slowly off script. So the first thing I do is I get those people back to basics because they went off the basics because in the beginning, the basics were all they knew and they were succeeding, right? The other problem is it could also be inspiration and motivation. Is our pay structure set up to where they're being bonus? And I'm sure that's a question I'm sure Michaela's probably going to breach at some point today. Yep. But is our structure set up to motivate and drive the behavior we're looking for? If we're looking for qualified demos, is their pay structure speaking to that? Or are we incentivizing something like the set appointment? If we're incentivizing the set appointment, there's a chance they may just throw it on to get paid, not to actually hope it goes through the whole process, right? And so couple of things back to basics on people that start out hot and go slow. If you find that's a pattern over and over, then have a retraining at the 4-week mark. Create a 3-hour crash course retraining process at the 30-day mark or the 4-week mark and say, hey, we know everyone starts to sort of go their own way at this point. So shame on us if we don't prepare. Let's go ahead and do this little training session to keep them on the same process they were in the beginning. So there's a couple ideas. Motivation and inspiration goes a long way too. I mean, carrot and stick can do enough, but we really want people to feel internally like they want to fill the calendar. I mean, obviously when we put lottery tickets, gift cards, and like different incentives, that can also drive the excitement and behavior. Our employees in the call center get a lot of rejection. It's our job to try and counteract that by doing a lot of positive things, by rewarding good behavior, by rewarding results that we're looking for. And so I would also say, do we have a fun environment? If not, that might be something we want to look at creating in order to drive that behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. And that does lead perfectly. My next question for you was based on compensation and how should that be factored in? I know you mentioned like basing it off of what you want your results to be. Can you dive a little bit deeper into that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So with the call center, we always want to do some sort of base pay, whether it's hourly or salary. I mean, whatever works for you in terms of your company is fine. And every market is different. So California's base pay is probably going to be a little different than the Midwest because cost of living different there, correct? So that's what you're going to run into is base pay is going to differ a little bit. But how we incentivize is truly the key to success here. Okay. So what we want to do is always start with the end in mind. We want to incentivize the result we want to get. Now, when we look at call center, their job is to get qualified appointments on the board where 85% of those turn into demoable appointments, right? If of the leads we're issuing of theirs, we want to be able to present to 85% of those. So if my goal is for the marketing team or the call center to create qualified appointments, well, then I want to, celebrate the set, but I don't want to incentivize the set. Then they're just incentivizing the victory of getting the customer to say yes. I want the customer to say yes too, but I want the customer to say yes to the set. I want them to say yes to the confirmation. I want them to say yes to the salesperson when he arrives that he can come in the front door. I want them to say yes to the salesperson at the end. If I want the yeses all the way through, then I have to incentivize the end results. And so I really recommend we pay bonuses based on demos. And then also if we're able to do it with our budget, I like to incentivize the sale as well once we're over a certain volume. I'm not going to incentivize every sale, but I will say that if we're hitting key benchmarks, so let's say we've decided that a successful telemarketer ends up with $70,000 of net good business at the end of the month. Well, if we know that's what a good telemarketer does for us, then when they hit the 70 mark, maybe we give them a kickback. Could be a flat rate, could be $500, could be a percentage of the sales. Depends on what works with our budget. But I would say that if we want qualified appointments, bonus on demo, and then additional on sale when we're hitting benchmarks. Now, the one thing in order to keep us under budget, because look, the reality is that we're going to have really high performers and we're going to have like mid-level performers. Low performers probably won't be with us that long. Hopefully we can coach them up. That's our goal. But if we can't, they may not be with us. We want the pay structure to really drive the performance to those middle and higher producing people. So the other thing that we want to think about is there needs to be some sort of qualifier, whether that's the amount of appointments set per hour, whether that's the amount of demos per hour. There has to be some sort of, we need this minimum production from you, or there's no money to pay bonuses. For instance, if I'm paying you $15 or $20 an hour and you produce one demo that happens to sell, you wrote one laydown, good job, but for a whole month, I still have to pay you the hourly the whole month. So I need to make sure that if I'm giving them bonuses, it's based on they've earned them through hitting those minimum production standards. So that qualifier could be based on the set. I'm just not going to bonus the set. I'm going to bonus the demo or the sale.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love the fact that you still keep goals around appointment sets, but you don't actually pay the bonuses unless they turn into the demo and you're following what your goals are with that compensation. I know you mentioned something about, keeping the environment fun, and we got a really good question about that. How do you create a fun and connected environment for a virtual call center? Mm-hmm. So what is the best practice to manage that virtual call center to make it a little bit more enticing?
Yeah. Good question. It is a little more challenging with virtual. Shamara, I think that's your name. If I'm saying it wrong, you'll have to forgive me. I'm sure people have been butchering it your whole life. But Shamara, great question. I do have a couple of clients too that we have call centers that are based all around the world. We have some employees in the Philippines, some in Brazil, not even just America. So we've got agents we coach all over, and it is more challenging with a virtual call center. However, I will tell you that you can create just as many fun games through Zoom and doing virtual things than anywhere else. Kayla Davis, who's on the call, she commented earlier at RJW New Jersey. I sent her a template and we play Family Feud. And so what we do is we get everybody together, and there's a couple of teams. You can have team blue and team red or your company colors. I like to do a lot of competitions because competition drives performance, right? Mm-hmm. So when we do something like Family Feud, you get two teams, and then everyone's on. You can pull them together on virtual on Zoom. You can do a screen share, and then we answer the questions. And then the winning team gets, I mean, we have lived in the world of Venmo or Cash App. We can, of course, Venmo or Cash App bonuses to them. I do that all the time on my calls. But we could also do, you know, since everybody's remote, we could send them a gift card or an Amazon card or whatever they like. You know, it really depends. Some like food. If they like food, you could DoorDash food to be sent to their house. Like you have to think outside the box in terms of what they would like, but do little things. And then the winning team, of course, gets a prize. Maybe the winning team gets a half an hour early paid off of the phone, right? Like maybe on a Friday, instead of leaving at 3, they get to leave at 2:30 because they won. So they get an early Friday celebration. There's lots of ways that we could incentivize that, but we want to keep it fun. Check in, send little emojis, send smiley faces. How many dials are we at? You know, be checking in either through a chat functionality. We could do that with Slack. Some people use Slack, or, you know, some of the texting apps or group training apps. But make sure that we have an open communication with those people. When we're virtual, when everybody's working remote, it's really easy for people to feel like they're kind of out on an island, and the rejection might be getting to them more. In the office environment, the rejection, we can all kind of go, that was a tough one, and we can all relate. When they're virtual, they may need a sounding board a couple of times a day because of all the rejection. So keep that in mind when we're coaching, maybe checking in on your people at least once or twice a day and just say, hey, as the leader, what can I do to help you today? Is there any objections that you keep getting that I can help you work through? Sometimes they just need the reminder that we're there and we care, and we're all fighting the same battle, even if we're all on different computers and different sides of the world. So, yeah.
Love that. We all work remotely here at Contractor Appointments as well. We have a group that's in Minnesota that they'll meet like once a week. But the rest of us, like me, who are out on the outskirts, we make sure we just have a meeting set up at least once a week for just 30 minutes. We just have a quick little Zoom call. We play a little game off of Jackbox TV, or we'll have what we call coffee talks. We'll just like come up with like 2 questions that everybody can answer. That's just like letting us know a little bit more about each other. Since we are a little bit more disconnected, it helps it feel more like a team environment, which really helps, I think. So love those little games and everything. I know Lisa did ask a question here. When do you have the time, since they're all on the phones the whole time? Do you just make time? How would you structure that, do you think?
Yeah. So of course, that's a good question, Lisa. Like I had a call center. I had an inbound team of like 6 or 7 people. And then I had an outbound team that just banged the phones of 15 to 20 people. But at first it was me and 2 other people, right? So it was just a few of us and someone had to cover the phones. When it comes to doing like a group training like that, I usually have like an admin person at the company field the phone calls for a half an hour or an hour. And, you know, what we decided as a company was that hour that we took off of the phones, if everyone's production even went up 1%, we were willing to lose on that hour if we had to. You know, we were willing to call those, and we might miss a couple of leads. Yes, right? Like that would happen unless I have a backup of an admin person. But I got to tell you, this is a big thing around our industry, is everyone's so busy working in the business, they never remember they still have to work on the business because we're always pounding the phones, right? And we don't realize like the amount of production that we would see an increase in if we did take an hour a week, right? Or if we even took a half an hour a week to start and bring everybody together and do one of these little fun endeavors, right? Anytime we're working remote, we should be doing a weekly meeting. I mean, there's no other way to keep people together the way that we need to, right? So we should always be doing those weekly meetings. But then what I would do is once a month, I did like the game, like the Family Feud, or we did once a quarter, we did these little boot camps where we would bring everyone in, even if they lived far away. Now, for some people are an hour from the office, so they're not driving. Some people are, you know, states away. Obviously, that's not always possible. But if we can get a good majority of them in the office and Zoom with everybody else, that also can be an effective way. But we should be always having a weekly meeting to keep, much to what Michaella said, to keep everybody together. But then, you know, once a month, taking an hour off of the phones. And sometimes we would do that at the end of the day, like on a Friday, where the phones traditionally aren't really ringing anyway. Like Friday from 3 to 4, not the busiest time on the phone. So for us, that was what we would do. We would try and structure it either when we had the support of an admin person to field the calls just for an hour, or, you know, on the traditionally slower day.
Yeah, love that. I think that's great. Really, really helpful there. You know, being that I used to work in a call center before this position, the for everything, because you can get burnt out so quickly. You can lose motivation. You're working on your own, and you're in your own space, and you're getting rejections. Just being able to build up that team spirit and get your spirits up and everything, it helps a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So love that. I'll go ahead and jump into our next question here that I have for you. We touched on this really, really lightly, but I'd love to jump a little bit deeper. We talked about metrics and how we need to decide what metrics we should be tracking. So in your opinion, what metrics should be tracked and analyzed regularly to monitor the call center performance?
Yeah. Great question. So, and this is one that surprisingly companies don't always track. I mean, I was shocked to find out when I started working with other companies other than just my own that I was at for 11 years, I started to realize that people don't know how many dials they make. And that is, of all the metrics, if that one isn't in line, it's kind of hard to track the rest of them, because if I don't even know how many opportunities you had, how can I hold you accountable to a number if I don't even know how many opportunities you had to talk to someone, right? So the first and foremost thing we need to look at is dials. Now, if you're in an inbound call center where you're just fielding leads coming in, and of course those warm web forms that come in from your website, your pay-per-click partners and things of that nature. I'm talking about those too when I say inbound, even though technically you're calling those back. Those are inbound leads in my eyes, because they're a warm lead that was initiated by the consumer. So if we're talking about that, you're not really monitored on dials because you don't know how many dials are coming in. For that, you are going to be more focused on the raw number, right? So when we're talking about inbound leads, the raw number of leads per month coming in, when you see that on the inbound side, we should be setting 75% of the raw leads coming in per month. Now, I'm not talking about lead aggregator and shared leads. I'm talking about inbound leads that are SEO, pay-per-click leads that aren't sold to multiple companies. There's a different metric when it comes to a shared lead. So we can come to that in a moment. But on those warm leads that are coming to you, we should be setting 75% of those. If we are not, the question is why? Are they unqualified? Are they out of our service area? Are these not homeowners? We have to start digging in and looking at that metric. So you're really monitor off raw when it comes to inbound. When you're dialing outbound, we're monitoring off the amount of dials per hour. Now, if you strictly call outbound, all you do is pound the phone. You don't field inbound. You don't do other stuff. All you do is call out. You should be hitting 35 to 40 dials per hour if you're on a manual dialer, if you're manually dialing. If you're on an auto dialer, some sort of predictive dialer, then that's not really up to you other than your wait time and when you're available to take a call. So dials are number one. Number two is going to be how many phone conversations that you're having, because we all know connection rate, especially on older leads, connection rate on older leads is only going to be about 10 to 15%. So if you dial 100, you might have 10 to 15 people answer the phone. Okay. So really what it's about is how many full phone conversations can I get in? And I need to know that. And I track that off of whatever my CRM calls it, but a lot of them call it dispositions. When you get off of a phone call, right? What happened? You have to label that as, a set appointment, a call me back next year, not interested, doesn't own a home, any of those things. Any of those things are dispositions. If we look at those, we can track how many full phone conversations we're getting in. And then, of course, the next metric would be how many we're setting. And then from setting, we have to look at how many issue, how many demo, and then, of course, how many sell. So those are all different metrics, but those are the most important ones. With dialing, 35 to 40 dials per hour if you're outbound only. If you're inbound and outbound, if you field some inbound, but most of your job is outbound, you should still be making 25 to 30 dials per hour minimal. And Michaella, I just find that most companies aren't even close to that. I go in and they're making 10 dials an hour, and it's you'll never hit the type of numbers you need to hit making that few phone calls when you have a database full of gold of homeowners just sitting here, right?
Yeah.
That we need to call. So yeah.
Absolutely. And just for clarity for myself, and I don't know if anybody else will have this question, when you're talking about that 35 to 40 dials an hour, is that per person or as a whole as a call center?
Per person. Per person.
I figured, but I just wanted to clarify there.
Good question. Yeah, it's per person. And so, sometimes I go in and we're making 100 calls a day, and I'm like, well, at 15% contact rate on old leads, you're only having 15 conversations a day then. And if you have 15 conversations, that's 15 people answering. 3 will hang up on you. we're having 12 conversations. Out of those 12 conversations, if we can convert half of those, 6 appointments, great. But that's out of 100 dials. Like so many companies, they aren't even doing that many. And so we have to look at that. And if we're not dialing, the question is then why? If you're a remote call center, maybe harder to diagnose that. If you're in the office, I can tell you exactly why it is. Too much time between phone calls because we're reading notes in the system and trying to decide if we want to call this lead or not. Talking to our neighbor about what a jerk the last guy was on the phone. Extended bathroom breaks, playing on our phone. Those are what I find are what's slowing down our dials. It's all behavioral. It's not usually that we can't. It's that we're distracted. We kind of, as a society, have a large case of ADD in general, right? The internet has sort of done that to us. So we now we're all over the place and we have to adjust at work. So yeah.
Absolutely. We did have a few questions come in here. Dawn, I think we pretty much covered that in an 8-hour shift. What should the number of dials be? We talked about hourly, so we can kind of wrap it up. But Brandon, in confirmations, how do you recommend decreasing the number of cancellations and no-shows? You talked about how they have added a text function, but they're still seeing no-shows and cancellations at a higher rate.
Yes. So Brandon, a couple of things. There's a few, there's like 2 or 3 issues you want to look at to troubleshoot this and find out where the problem is. Okay. So first and foremost, let's talk about confirmations first and text messaging. I agree you should use text messaging to confirm. What I do not agree with is should not be your first go-to. So what happens with text messaging is text messaging and email. If people know they can confirm or speak to you through that channel, it's very hard to combat a cancel through text messaging and email, right? Oh, I just want to cancel. It's easy to type that in. It's much harder to tell a human being on the phone that we don't want you to come over. So the fact that we give them that out, I would ask myself, when am I texting? Here's what I would recommend and what I tell my clients. We should be making 4 passes through confirmation the day before an appointment. So let's say my appointment is for tomorrow on Friday. On Thursday, I need to be calling at 9. I need to be calling at noon. I need to be calling at 3, and I need to be calling after 5. If I don't get them by that 3 o'clock confirmation on the phone call, I'm going to send out a text, because I would rather know if they're going to do it or not so I can get my calendar ready for the sales team by the end of the night. So I will send a text later, but I would much rather discuss a cancellation with the customer over the phone versus give them an easy out, right? So be aware of when you're texting. Texting can be very effective because 96% of texts get answered in the first 12 seconds. So, I mean, if we're really trying to make a decision on this lead, that's good to know. But if I give that to them as their first confirmation with us, I give them a really easy out, and it's much easier for human beings to do that. So keep that in mind. Number 2, when we're calling, there's a couple of things. If your cancellations are super high, my question would be 2 things. Number 1, how far out are you setting appointments? Because if you're setting outside of 48 to 72 hours, we should expect a cancel rate, or could go up to 80% cancel. Because what happens is the customer is at the height of excitement at the moment that they fill out the lead form. Then we're supposed to get to it within 60 seconds. Then if we set the appointment out 5 days, everyone else has already got there before we have.
Yeah.
There's been 5 days of life stuff that could have came up, right? And now they're like, oh, our truck has a problem. I don't know how much that's going to cost, so I'm going to go ahead and put the window project off. We're like, if we'd gotten there in the first, 48 hours, 72 hours, there's just less chance that things can come up. So I would first examine how far out you are from setting to running the lead. The other thing that I would examine is your scripting. If we're having a cancellation rate, and KPI for this, key performance indicator, for those of you that aren't familiar with that term, how many leads should issue, right, would be the first question to know if your cancel rate is actually high. So on lead aggregator leads, once we get a lead set onto the schedule, those should be issuing at 60%, 70%. The other 30 to 40% are going to fall off because they bought from somebody else that got there before you did, or they get cold feet, change their mind, decide they're going to go with a repair, something else happens, right? So first thing that you would want to ask yourself is how many are canceling, to notice if that's a real problem, right? So look at how far out the leads are set. Look at your KPIs. Are you issuing, if it's lead aggregator, at least 60, 70%? If you are, then you're in pretty good shape. Now, if you're issuing 50% or less, unless it's a super old sweepstakes lead, everything should issue at least 50%, right? You might issue a little less on those, 5, 8-year-old leads, but overall, if you're not issuing at least 50% on these, older leads that are, not necessarily the warm inbound or home show leads or something like that. If you're issuing less than 50%, then there is a problem. Now, the scripting problem could be a couple of things. Are the employees setting just to get the lead on the board, or are they setting because they're hoping it's going all the way through? Because most of the call center people when I go in and start working with a company, I go in and it's like, oh yeah, we just want to get off the phone as quick as possible and get this appointment set. That's what the customer wants. It's like, but that's not really what the customer needs. And so what ends up happening is the customer isn't setting because they have a real vested interest in the appointment. And that's what we need to create through our scripting. We need to create good need uncovering through our scripting. So the customer's like, yeah, now that you mention it, I probably should look at this sooner rather than later. That retains the appointment. The other piece to that is value of the visit. Are they seeing value in our visit when our sales team comes over? If what we're saying on the phone sounds like we're going to come out and sales pitch them, they're going to cancel. If that person we're talking to doesn't sell their spouse on the appointment, they're going to cancel. Right. And so there's a few things to consider there, and creating that urgency on the front end during the call and creating a lot of value in the visit. So they're looking forward to the appointment. That's really what we want to do there. If there's nothing about our appointment that says, wow, that would really be helpful, then something more fun comes along than window dork and they cancel. Right. Yeah. So we have to really consider that when we're looking at this whole thing. And then other than that, like we have to have, if we know cancellations are happening, we should have a script called saving canceling appointments, because we need to be prepared. If we know the cancellation is coming, how can we retain, maybe 50% of those for another day on the schedule?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And I think it really leads into my next question too, because I was kind of going to talk about scripting and what kind of scripts you should have in place. And basically, is there different processes and different scripts that you should follow based on where the lead was generated from?
Yes, completely different, because people are in different points of the buying process depending on where we get them. So for instance, if you show up and knock on someone's door, so let's say it's a canvassing lead, right? You are surprising people, and you are getting people that are really not in the market shopping for your product yet, and you're bringing them into the market, right? There has to be a different script for calling that than calling one that's like, hey, I was on your website, you guys are great, and I really want to buy a bathroom from you, right? Those are obviously going to be two different scripts, because this one's going to give me a bunch of, we're not ready now, we're not doing it till next year, and I'm going to have to overcome that. And then this one is going to be like, oh, when can you come out, and how much is it, and what's your lead time? And so those are different types of objections come up based on, the nature of the lead. The lead that comes from a lead aggregator went online and did an online search saying bathroom pros near me, roofing companies in my neighborhood, who's the best contractor for siding in my state. They'll make those kind of searches, right? So the intent and to know that they already have a problem is there. On the other hand, if I'm at Strawberry Festival and I just see, window siding and roofing company flagging people down and giving out free water bottles, I didn't go to the Strawberry Festival with the intent of buying windows. So the script on following up with those is, of course, going to be different than, a different type of lead that already has the need established. With those people, we're taking all the future buyers and we're converting them to now buyers. So it has to be a different script for that reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kyla did ask a great question here too. Mm-hmm. What is the best way of preventing the one-leggers? How do you make sure that all decision makers are going to be there?
Great question, Kyla. Thank you for that. That's the number one reason I get brought in to work with companies is one party. And so that's a great one. And I'm sure there are other people on the call that have thought, oh, wow, I should ask that too. That's a good one. First and foremost, with one party, we are I would say 90% of companies are using really poor verbiage. And that's the first thing that creates a lot of one legs is poor verbiage. If you are finding yourself saying this word on the phone or these words, decision maker, you are taking a word that they already are very afraid of. And you're literally saying, you're showing them your cards. Because the minute they hear the word decision maker, okay, the customer almost always rebuttals us right back with, well, I don't want to make any decisions. We don't need to both be here. I just need a price. I just want a quote. It immediately triggers resistance. And it's because people are used to being forced into a decision. Now, let me be very clear about this. I've been on the sales end of the business too. I've ran the appointments myself and I've ran a sales team. So I agree with us needing both people there. What I don't agree with is the verbiage that most companies use, which is, are you married or are you the sole homeowner? Because what we don't realize is that there are so many two-party scenarios that drop between the cracks, because there are people that'll say, well, I'm married. Yes and yes, I'm married and I'm the sole homeowner. Or they'll say, I'm not married. It's just me you'll be meeting with. It's just me you'll need to talk to. I make all the decisions. And then you get to their house as the salesperson and you find out that there's someone they've been going with for 17 years and they live together and share bills.
Yep.
We did that person here, right? And so the first thing is, don't use the word decision maker. Now, I agree we need that. So how do we say that in a different way? Use the verbiage, is there anyone else whose opinion you value on projects around the home? And you will be surprised how many times you dig out, oh yeah, my boyfriend. Even though you already asked them about their spouse in the house, which is another verbiage thing. It's a little trick that I have that I want to share with you guys. The days of saying husband and wife are over. Mm-hmm. We live in 2023, and unless you want to make a lot of strong, independent women angry, don't ask if their husband's going to be there, okay? Learned that the hard way, and I am one of those strong, independent women. I'm married now, but for many years I was not, right? And so it's interesting because so often, well-meaning, and then the customer goes, well, what, you think because I'm a woman I can't make a decision on a home improvement project without a man? You think it's because it's construction? And you're like, no, I mean, if I was talking to him, I'd want you there. If I'm talking to you, I want him there. And you have to backpedal. I have found it better, just don't get in the ring. Don't set it up so that there's any verbiage anyone can argue with. So what I found is really effective is to say the word spouse in the house. Why? Because it's all encompassing. It covers married couples, fiance and fiance, boyfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend, girlfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend, covers all scenarios. Spouse in the house means anyone you're romantically involved with that you live with, right? So that covers all things. Now, will people still lie? Yes. They're still going to go, no, it's just me. You're just dealing with me. But the beginning of it is using the proper verbiage so we make sure we know about everyone, that could be involved. If you use the word significant other or partner, you make a certain group of people mad. You use the word married, you make another group of people mad. So you're trying to sort of walk this tightrope of how do I use the right verbiage, right? So is there a spouse in the house there with you? No, it's just me. Oh, okay. Is there anyone else whose opinion you value on projects around the home? That's the beginning. The rest of it, I do trainings on this. We're going to do probably a one-party boot camp in a few months. So follow me on social media. I'll tell you about it when it does come up if you wanted to be part of it. So we'll go deeper then.
Awesome. Love it. I love that verbiage. As someone who was also the strong, independent woman for a long time, I am also married now. See how that would go. So totally get that. Love how you phrase it. Just really good verbiage there.
Trial and error. Learned what worked and what didn't, right? Got my teeth kicked in and said, ooh, that didn't work. Let's go ahead and try this, right? So
go ahead and spin that around.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I only have one more question for you today. I know we're getting a little low on time here, but what strategies or technology upgrades would be implemented that can enhance the call center agent training and development that you would recommend?
Training and development. Yeah. Well, the first thing is have a training process, right? And technology, there's a million technologies out there we can look into. I don't have any I specifically recommend by name for training. There are a few out there. What I would say though, is that anything that tracks how much they're learning. So for instance, if you have a training platform where there's a certain amount of learning and then a quiz at the end, that's very effective. Why? Because it's not just about them learning it, it's about them understanding it, right? And if our callers don't understand the why behind what they're saying, chances are they're not going to read the script you want them to read, right? And so if we want to make sure that everybody is doing something in a duplicatable, systematic fashion, which we do, we should have a training process. And a lot of the virtual ones out there, you can put in information and then have a quiz or a test at the end. That is what I would say is most effective. I mean, I created my own training process that way at the company I came from. And so I just kind of did it by hand, but now technology can help us with that. So there's no reason that we can't do that. A lot of my companies use Engage stage for the sales process, right, in the house. And a lot of companies I'm finding now are trying ways to incorporate that in training marketing people and lead generation people. So because you can see how long they spend on each slide. So that does help us to see what people are learning, right? But definitely in terms of other vendors, any of the Hatch vendor is a great vendor for texting and being able to contact our customers that way. But there's a lot of technology out there. I would really advise everyone to do your due diligence, to sit down and do demos with some of these vendors so you can learn about what they offer. Some of it might feel like a sales pitch or whatever, but I'll tell you what ends up happening is everyone says, I don't know if I want to be pitched by these vendors. And then they write me an email and say, what vendor should I use for this? And I just recommend a vendor they'd use anyway. So I'm always like, check out, it's never a bad thing to learn something. If it takes a half an hour out of your day and you're going to learn about how technology is helping our industry, whether you use that vendor or not, I bet you pick up a couple tidbits you can use. So it's worth sitting down and hearing some of these vendors out and hearing what they have to offer.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And even just being able to be on some of these webinars lately, I've learned about a lot of these vendors and just being able to hear them and what their pitches are. And it's just really informational. Even if you end up never using them, at least you have an idea of what they offer. And if at any point in the future that ends up fitting what you're needing, you have the knowledge now. So you can either say yes or no.
Absolutely. Can never hurt you to learn something new. I've learned stuff years ago where I'm like, I don't know how I would ever use that. And years later, it came in handy. So you always have to be a student all the time.
Absolutely. Well, I love that. Well, I'll give a couple more seconds to see if any more questions roll in, but I think
Nick asked something that's somewhat related. So yeah, Nick, that's why I asked for anyone else whose opinion they value on this type of project, because a lot of senior citizens, we get their kids, right? We find out later they have a son or daughter that helps them, or maybe they're a widow or a widower and they have a niece or a nephew, right, that they consult on things around the home. And so that's why I say, is there anyone else whose opinion you value that you'd like to, bounce ideas off of? And a lot of times they will say, oh, yeah, my son actually, right? Or something of that nature. So plus, let me tell you, from a sales perspective, you want to get the kids there, because even if mom makes a decision without talking to the kids and she tells the kids in the next 3 days, we get a big fat cancellation in the mail because little Sally doesn't want mom spending her inheritance on new windows. Now, we know mom needs the windows, right? I would rather little Sally be at the appointment and I can get all of us on board versus her being uncomfortable with it, because really a lot of times they're just trying to protect their parent. It's not necessarily, something that's negative. It's, if my mom came and said, hey, look, I'm getting new windows. I spent 10 grand, right? What's the first thing you think? Well, you'd probably say, well, mom, who are you paying that to? Right. And you'd have questions. And so it's better if we can get the kids there, because then we can get everybody on board.
Absolutely. And Maddie, this is a great question.
Yeah.
They're becoming more and more common. How do we handle the grant leads that come in?
Yeah, so it's interesting because this happens when our inbound leads slow down, guys. So when, whether it's lead aggregator or it's our paid search partners, like whoever it might be, if we don't have a lot of internet searches for your certain product, we have to get creative in how we scoop those up, right? And so grant leads, the customer, the point behind the grant lead is the customer, of course, would like something for free, which is no different than a sweepstakes lead. It's the exact same concept, which is that the customer would rather have it for free than pay for it. Let me tell you the truth. It's not even all poor people that enter for grant leads. We get grant leads on $500,000 houses. So first of all, we have to know our mentality can't be that all these grant leads are bad, because a lot of companies feel that way. I will tell you there are gold in there, just like there's gold in sweepstakes, right? If I get 10 of them, all 10 of them are not going to be great leads. But I will tell you that there will be 20 to 30% in there that are qualified and that will fit what we do. Now, then again, when we call them and they said, I was just interested in the grant, I don't know why you're calling unless it's for the free windows. If that's the route they take, we have to go through and use a scripting process to verify their information first, where we're making sure that they're a qualified homeowner, right? And then if we want to go forward with the lead because we've decided it meets our criteria, then we go into need uncovering and we say, well, let me ask you a few questions and see if you would qualify for one of our programs. Then we go through need uncovering. Then when we come out the other side of need uncovering, it sounds like whether the windows were free with the grant program through the government or not, this is definitely a project you're going to have to do either way. Is that true? If the customer says yes, okay, great. Well, we'd love to tell you about some of our lower cost options and our easy month-to-month payment plans. And then we can go through and incorporate that so it fits with the narrative, but it's what we do anyway. There's no lie there. There's no deception. It's the truth. It's just in how we present it. But we must get the commitment at some point after the need uncovering that whether they win or not, whether it's a grant or it's not, that at some point they will probably have to tackle this project. If the answer is yes, we go forward. And then we're able to tell them a little bit about how we do have some, some companies have no money down. Some people have low cost, low interest, no payment, no interest. We could talk about that as an affordability option as our other programs that we're going to offer. So, yeah.
Yeah. Great approach to that. And I think I get a lot of people that just want to shrug those leads off and be like, I'm not working that. I'm not even going to give it an effort. They're just going to say no. And so have just changing your mentality towards them makes such a huge difference. And just being like, well, like what questions can we ask where we can still diagnose what that need is, and how can we kind of go through that rejection and get through that still.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we have to be looking at the opportunity, not the obstacle, and it's easy to look at the obstacle. It's easy to say, well, these are all, poor people. They can't afford my stuff. Guys, I sold a average ticket of $40,000 steel roofing system, and I operated off sweepstakes leads. So it can be done. and it can be done. It's just a matter of good scripting. So insurance jobs are a little bit different, Maddie. Like insurance jobs, my company, we never did insurance. So I do have a lot of clients I've partnered with that have done insurance, and I've wrote scripts for it. So I do understand it. But with insurance jobs, if we're a remodeler that's on a one-call close, we have to have a process set up for an insurance division. It needs to be a separate division because it's very tough when they're getting 3 bids to try and close them on the spot, unless it's a contingency deal and we already have the insurance, process worked out with us. So that's kind of a different deal. If you are trying to figure out, do I want to go or don't I want to go? And you're not really an insurance company, but you get one here and there. Well, then we would want to figure out, do they have check in hand or are they still in the bid collecting process? That's a question we can ask on the phone and find that out.
Awesome. This one, I think this will probably be our last one to go through just for sake of time.
Yeah.
But is there any lead sources that you recommend for an outbound call center?
Shamara, there's a few. I mean, in terms of lead generation, shows and events are a great lead generation tool. And what I say that is because at shows and events, I can collect sweepstakes leads, I can collect data, and I can set appointments. When I put those into the database, if I'm doing a massive amount of shows per year, that feeds my database with fresh leads all year, right? And I'm always calling those. What a lot of companies don't do is they don't dive into their current database either. That's a lead source that's kind of gets ignored, which is, calling back those old inquiries. If it's a year-old lead, a lot of people are like, oh, it's dead, I don't want to call it. Guys, if they didn't do the project yet, they've had a year of need to build up. We call back and they haven't done it. It's a year worse than it was when we talked to them last. And guess who's not banging their phone down? Any of your competitors, just you. The other one for outbound call centers that gets ignored a lot, I find out, is past customers. We somehow have this egotistical idea that they're going to call us when they're ready because everyone loves us so much. While you may have created a great customer experience and they do love you and you did a great job, I'm not arguing that. I would say that the way consumers buy in 2023 is different. They use the Google machine.
Yeah.
They don't say to themselves, oh, what was that great siding company? I think they do roofing too. They don't do that. They don't do that anymore. They say roofing companies near me. And if you're not first, in the great words of Ricky Bobby, you're last. So, we have to make sure that we stay in front of them. Past customers calling to check up on how they're doing and then talking about the other products we offer, or do they have an additional bathroom we can do or something like that. That's a lead source that gets ignored so much. So that's one of those things that we need to stay diligent on too as an industry.
Absolutely. Well, this was so informative. I'm so grateful for your time, Megan.